Here's something you might not have noticed. The gardeners who really know what they're doing almost never lose a plant. Their tomatoes don't yellow out and quit on them in July. Their peppers don't just sit there sulking all season, refusing to grow. Year after year, their beds are full and green and loaded, while the rest of us are standing in line at the garden centre in June, buying replacements for the ones that died. And it's easy to look at that and think they've just got some special touch. Better soil, more time, a greener thumb than you were born with. So why does yours keep struggling? When you're watering it the same, planting the same varieties, and doing everything the tutorials told you to do, the answer is one small habit they do about once a month. It costs somewhere around $2, it takes about 10 minutes, and for whatever reason, almost nobody puts it in their videos. You'd think somebody would have said something. Nobody did. I ignored it myself for years, and I paid for it in dead plants and wasted money. Then I started doing it, and my garden mostly stopped dying on me. So let me show you exactly what it is, why it works, and how to do it in your own backyard. Let me take you back a few years first, because I wasn't always the guy whose beds fill up every summer. There was a stretch where I did everything the labels told me. I bought the big box of blue crystal fertilizer, mixed it into my watering can, and dumped it on everything every couple of weeks, like clockwork. And for about 10 days, the plants would green right up and look fantastic. Then they'd fade again. By the middle of summer, half my bed looked tired and worn out, and the other half was flat out dying. And I could not figure out why I was pouring so much food into these plants and getting so little back. It turned out I was feeding them in exactly the wrong way. That mistake seemed small at the time. It wasn't, and I'll come back to it later, because it's one of the biggest ones I see people make. So here's what's actually going on when a plant slowly gives up on you, because it's almost never what folks think. It's rarely one dramatic event. It's a slow starvation. Your plant is pulling food out of the soil every single day, using it to build leaves, stems, roots, and fruit. And in a home garden, especially a raised bed or a container, that soil runs out of steam a lot faster than you'd guess. A tomato plant in a pot can strip its little bit of soil bare in a matter of weeks. The plant isn't being dramatic when it starts to fade, it's simply run out of groceries. Now here's the part underneath that, and this is where it takes a turn most people don't expect. The soil isn't supposed to run out. Good soil is alive. It's full of microbes, fungi, and earthworms, a whole underground crew whose entire job is to break down organic matter and turn it into food your plants can drink up. When that crew is thriving, your soil refills itself. But that crew slowly dies off when the soil gets ignored, or when it gets blasted month after month with harsh synthetic salts. And once the life in your soil is gone, you're left with what's basically dead dirt. Dead dirt can't feed anything. So you feed harder, and the plant perks up for a week, and then it crashes right back down because you've been treating the symptom and starving the cause the whole time. Dead soil grows dying plants. That's the short version of almost every garden failure I've ever seen. The experienced gardeners understand this in their bones, so they do two things differently. They never let the soil run empty, and they never let that underground crew starve. And the way they do it isn't some expensive machine or a secret product off a shelf. Once a month, they hand their soil a gentle, living drink. A compost tea, a worm casting tea, a splash of liquid seaweed. A cheap batch of nourishment that refills the groceries and feeds the crew at the same time. That's the whole secret. It's almost too simple to believe, which is probably why nobody bothers to film it. And that living soil, that underground crew, is the single thing that quietly decides whether your garden thrives or just barely hangs on. It's the piece I understand best now, after years of getting it wrong, and it's the piece I spent the most time on when I put together my book, The 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. It's 115 pages, and it's built for home gardeners who want to pull a whole lot more food out of the exact beds they already have. No extra space, no expensive equipment. It breaks down the soil biology we're talking about right now in plain English, the pruning that pushes more fruit onto every plant, the companion planting layouts that protect your crops, and a month-by-month planting schedule so you're harvesting for an entire season instead of a couple of short weeks. This is genuinely the stuff that turned my own garden around, and that's the only reason I mention it. It's $17. You can scan the QR code on your screen right now or click the link down in the description below. Grab it whenever you're ready, and let's get back out to the bucket and make this feed together. So that's the habit in one sentence. But what that cheap monthly drink actually does under the soil is bigger than it sounds. And once you see how easy it is to make, you're going to wonder why nobody handed this to you on day one. Let's start with my favorite version because it's the cheapest and the most forgiving. And you almost can't mess it up. Worm casting tea. Now, worm castings are just worm manure. It's the dark, crumbly, coffee ground looking stuff that earthworms leave behind, and it is loaded with nutrients and living microbes in a form your plants can use right away. A bag of worm castings costs a few dollars and lasts a long, long time. And that's exactly where the $2 a month number comes from. That's not an exaggeration, by the way. A single bag stretches across a whole season of monthly feeds. To make the tea, you take about a cup or two of those castings and you scoop them into an old sock, a piece of cloth, or a mesh bag. Tie it off at the top so it works like a big tea bag. Then you drop that bag into a 5-gallon bucket filled with water and you let it steep overnight. Give it a stir whenever you walk past it. By the next morning, you've got a mild brown tea that's absolutely full of the microbes your tired soil has been missing. One tip that matters more than people realize: if you can, use rainwater or let your tap water sit out in the open for a day before you use it. The chlorine they put in fresh tap water is there to kill microbes, and you're trying to grow microbes so you don't want to fight yourself. Then you pour it on. You water that tea right into the base of your plants, soaking the root zone where it counts, about once a month through the growing season. You don't need to flood them. A good, generous drink at the roots of each plant does the job, because you're not just dropping off nutrients, you're planting a colony of living things in that soil that keep working for weeks after you've walked away. And one rule here: always water a dry plant with plain water first, then feed. Pouring a strong feed onto bone-dry, thirsty roots can stress them, so a plain drink first, then the tea. If you happen to have extra tea left over, strain some into a spray bottle and mist it lightly on the leaves early in the morning. That's called a foliar feed, and a plant really can take in a little nourishment straight through its leaves. Just do it early enough that the leaves dry off before the hot midday sun hits them wet. Now, if you don't have worm castings on hand, don't let that stop you, because a plain compost tea does nearly the same work. Same idea exactly. You steep a shovelful of good, finished compost in a bucket of water overnight, and then you water it in around your plants. Keep the bucket loosely covered while it sits, partly so it doesn't fill up with leaves and become a mosquito nursery, and partly so the dog doesn't wander over and drink it. Because while it won't really hurt them, it isn't clean water either. And please don't overthink the brewing side of this. The internet will try to sell you air pumps and bubblers and fancy brewing kits for this exact task. You don't need any of it. A bucket, a scoop of castings or compost, and one night of patience is genuinely plenty. Here's the add-on that the pros lean on, and it's the closest thing to a tonic I know of in the whole garden. A splash of liquid seaweed, sometimes sold as liquid kelp. This one isn't really a fertilizer in the muscle-building sense. Think of it more like a multivitamin. It's packed with trace minerals and natural plant hormones that help roots dig deeper and help a plant hold up under stress, whether that's a brutal hot spell, a surprise cold snap, or the shock of being transplanted. A bottle of it is cheap and lasts most of a season because you only need a capful or two in a full watering can. Mix a little into your monthly tea, and now you've handed your plants both the meal and the vitamins in a single trip out to the garden. This is one of those quiet little habits that separates a garden that limps through a rough week from a garden that shrugs the rough week off and keeps right on producing. And let me settle that $2 question all the way, because I want you to trust the number. A bag of castings, a bottle of seaweed, and a bag of compost you might already be making for free in a pile out back. Spread across a full season of monthly feeds, you truly are looking at a couple of dollars a month. Compare that to buying replacement plants all summer, and it's the kind of math that makes an accountant smile. If you really want it close to free, start a small worm bin in a tote in the garage. You feed it your kitchen scraps, the worms turn it into castings, and now your monthly feed costs you nothing but banana peels. That's about as cheap as gardening gets. Up to now, everything I've shown you has been about what you put into the soil. This is where it flips. because that feed only pays off if you don't turn around and undo it, and there are a few simple habits around it that make the whole system actually work. The first is watering, and honestly, it trips up more gardeners than any bug ever will. Plants hate drama. A plant that gets soaked one day, goes bone dry for four, then gets drowned again is a stressed out plant. And stressed plants are exactly the ones that yellow, drop their flowers and fruit, and invite in disease. What you want instead is deep, steady watering. A good long soak, less often so the water sinks down deep and the roots chase it down to where the soil stays cool and moist even in a heat wave. Shallow little daily sprinkles do the opposite. They train the roots to stay up near the hot, dry surface where they cook. Then once you've watered deep, you lock all that moisture in with mulch. A couple of inches of straw, shredded leaves, or wood chips laid over the soil holds the water in, keeps the roots cool, blocks out weeds, and slowly rots down to feed that same soil life we've worked so hard to protect. Mulch is doing quiet, round-the-clock work for you. It's about the laziest, highest payoff move in the entire garden. The second habit is to keep feeding the soil itself, not only handing the plant a quick drink. So once a month, right alongside your tea, take a little finished compost or a handful of worm castings and scratch it gently into the top inch of soil around each plant, then water it in. This is called top dressing, and it's like restocking the whole pantry instead of just serving one more meal. Over the following weeks, the rain and the worms carry that material down into the root zone, and your soil stays rich and full of life clear through August, instead of running thin and hungry right when your plants need it most. Now, let me come back to that mistake I promised you at the beginning, the blue crystal fertilizer I used to dump on everything every 2 weeks. Here's what I completely misunderstood back then. More feeding is not better feeding. Those fast synthetic fertilizers are basically candy for plants. They deliver a quick sugar rush of growth, but it's soft, weak, watery growth. The exact kind of tender growth that aphids and other pests swarm to. And then it crashes. If that sounds harmless, keep watching because it gets worse. The part of that synthetic feed the plant doesn't immediately use doesn't just disappear. It builds up in your soil as salt. If you've ever seen a chalky white crust form on top of your potting soil or around the base of a container, that crust is the salt, and it slowly burns the roots and drives off the very soil life that keeps your plants alive. So the fix for a struggling plant isn't to feed it harder. It's to feed it gently and let the living soil do the heavy lifting for you. And while I'm busting things that waste your money, let me save you some on Epsom salt. Folks swear up and down that it's a miracle cure for tomatoes and peppers, but unless your soil is genuinely short on magnesium, and most soil isn't, you're just throwing salt at a problem you don't actually have. And salt is the last thing your soil needs more of. Test your soil before you treat it, or just skip the stuff entirely. That's $2 more, far better spent on a bag of castings. The timing of this next part matters more than people give it credit for too. There's a rhythm to feeding. You feed through the active growing season when your plants are busy pushing out new leaves and setting fruit, roughly spring on into late summer. Then, as things cool off in fall and the plants start naturally winding down for the year, you ease way back. Feeding a plant hard late in the season just forces out tender new growth right before the first frost comes along and kills it, which does the plant absolutely no favors and wastes your feed. Match your feeding to what the plant is actually trying to do in that moment, and you'll never pour a wasted drop. And learn to read the leaves, because a plant will tell you exactly what it needs if you just slow down and look. The older, lower leaves turning pale and yellow while the whole plant looks hungry usually means it's low on nitrogen, and it's time for that monthly feed. Yellowing that shows up between the veins while the veins themselves stay green points more toward a specific mineral being short. New growth that comes in stunted, curled, or oddly coloured is very often a sign the roots are struggling, and that struggle frequently traces right back to salt buildup or soggy, waterlogged soil. You do not have to become a soil scientist to catch this. You just have to walk your rows once a day and actually look the same way you'd glance at a friend across the table and notice something's off before they even say a word. Here's the part that makes every bit of this worth the 10 minutes. It compounds. The very first month you do this, you're feeding hungry plants and they green up and perk up. And that alone feels good. But down under the surface, the real work is happening. You're rebuilding living soil. And living soil holds water better, releases nutrients steadily instead of in boom and bust spikes, and fights off disease on its own without you doing a thing. So the second month is easier than the first. And by the second season, you are gardening on top of soil that quietly does half the job for you. That, right there, is the entire reason the pros make it look so effortless. It's not magic, and it's not a better thumb than yours. They've simply been refilling the tank a little every month for years, while the rest of us run the tank down to empty and then blame our luck. So let's put the whole habit together, because it really is this simple. Once a month through the growing season, you steep a batch of worm casting or compost tea overnight, stir in a splash of liquid seaweed, water a dry plant first, then soak that living tea deep into the root zone. While you're out there, you scratch a little compost into the topsoil, you keep everything mulched, and in between feedings, you water deep and steady instead of shallow and panicky. 10 minutes, a couple of dollars, once a month. The mistake nearly everybody makes is doing nothing at all until a plant is already halfway dead, then panicking and hitting it with harsh chemicals, which just finishes the poor thing off. Steady beats heroic every single time in a garden. Do the small thing on a schedule and you simply stop needing the rescue. If this clicked for you and you want the full month-by-month system behind it, that's exactly what my book lays out from start to finish. The 30-day maximum yield protocol walks you through the soil, the feeding, the pruning, and the planting schedule, one clear step at a time, so every plant in your garden earns its keep. It's 115 pages for $17, and it's the same approach that finally stopped my garden from dying on me every July. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description below and grab your copy before this season slips away from you. Now remember, those gardeners whose plants somehow never seem to die? You know the boring little secret behind it now. There's no magic thumb, and there never was. There's just a cheap cup of tea poured on the same living soil once a month, year after year. Go brew your first batch this week, and I'll see you in the next one.